The rise of Shaquille O'Neal, from humble beginnings to NBA stardom. The air was thick with summer heat in the concrete sprawl of Newark, New Jersey, where sirens often sang louder than dreams. In the midst of it all, a young boy named Shaquille, awkward, tall, and unusually quiet, stood out not just because of his size, but because of his silence. He didn't speak much, but his eyes betrayed a hunger. Not for food, but for space. Space to grow, to breathe, to become. Born to a young mother and raised by a military stepfather, discipline wasn't a choice. It was a way of survival. His stepfather, Sergeant Philip Harrison, demanded order, respect, and commitment, values that clashed with the chaos just outside their doorstep. Young Shaq didn't always understand the lectures or the rigid rules. But over time, he absorbed them, not as restrictions, but as armor. They moved often, Germany, Texas, back to New Jersey. Every time they settled, Shaq grew. Literally. By 13, he stood over 6 feet tall, his limbs outpacing his confidence. Kids laughed. Coaches doubted. He stumbled through games, too big for his own body. But beneath the clumsy footwork, something else stirred, a defiance, quiet and burning. It wasn't until a coach in San Antonio handed him a basketball and said, "Use your size, don't hide from it," that the world began to tilt. Shaq didn't just play, he thundered. He rebounded like a wrecking ball and blocked shots like closing doors. The once shy kid started to roar, not with words, but through sheer physical dominance. The whispers changed. Coaches stopped seeing a giant boy. They saw a future star. He earned a scholarship to Louisiana State University. There, under Coach Dale Brown, Shaq transformed. The raw power sharpened into skill. His dunks rattled rims. His smile lit arenas. He wasn't just a player anymore, he was a force. Reporters called him a once-in-a-generation athlete. But even with the rising fame, Shaq remained grounded by one fear, that all of it could vanish. That he might fail the people who believed in him. That fear drove him. In 1992, the NBA draft called his name. First overall. Orlando Magic. From Newark's shadows to the league's spotlight, it felt like the world had finally opened its doors. But fame brings a different kind of storm. The real test was just beginning. And so, with a jersey on his back and a city on his shoulders, Shaquille O'Neal stepped into the arena. Not just to play, but to prove that the boy once overlooked would become the man no one could ignore. Dominating the court, the Shaq era and unstoppable power. Orlando had never seen anything like him. From the moment Shaquille O'Neal stepped onto the hardwood in 1992, it was clear, this wasn't just a rookie. This was a revolution in sneakers. He was 7 feet 1 inch, 300 pounds of muscle and mischief. He didn't glide, he crashed, bulldozed, and shattered expectations, sometimes literally. Twice in his rookie season, he broke backboards with sheer force, glass spraying like confetti. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a statement. The game would have to adjust to him, not the other way around. Yet beneath the spectacle, Shaq studied. He wasn't content with highlight reels. He dissected footwork, analyzed positioning, and sharpened his understanding of the game. Opponents who dismissed him as just a physical marvel soon learned otherwise. His mind worked as fast as his body. And with Penny Hardaway by his side, Orlando Magic quickly turned from expansion afterthoughts to title contenders. But greatness rarely arrives unchallenged. In 1995, the Magic reached the NBA Finals, only to be swept by a more seasoned Houston Rockets squad. Shaq felt the sting, not just of loss, but of inadequacy. He had dominated all season, but in the end, it wasn't enough. That summer, he trained harder, lifted longer, studied deeper. He vowed never to feel that powerless again. Then came Los Angeles. The Lakers offered more than just money, they offered legacy. The ghost of Kareem, the magic of Showtime, and the weight of championships danced in the air. Shaq accepted the challenge, signing the most lucrative contract in NBA history at the time. But with it came pressure. The city expected rings, and quickly. In LA, he found not only fame, but friction. Enter Kobe Bryant, young, hungry, brilliant, and bold. Together, they were explosive, both in talent and temperament. On the court, They dazzled. Off the court, egos clashed. But it was that very tension that forged one of the most dominant dynasties in NBA history. From 2000 to 2002, the Lakers ruled the league. 3 straight championships. Shaq, in his prime, was unstoppable. Finals MVP each time. No center could match his power, agility, or presence. He was a freight train in sneakers, a showman with purpose. But success rarely soothes ambition. The rift with Kobe deepened. Criticism from media, whispers of complacency, and the strain of stardom began to weigh heavy. Shaq could silence critics on the court, but not always in the locker room. By 2004, the dynasty was cracking. The Lakers fell in the finals. The front office chose youth over size. Shaq was traded. And just like that, the king of the West was cast out. He had built an empire and been exiled from it. But his story wasn't over. The next chapter would ask more than strength. It would demand transformation. Trials and triumphs, struggles, injuries, and reinvention. South Beach was a far cry from Hollywood. The palm trees swayed the same, but the expectations were different. In 2004, Shaquille O'Neal arrived in Miami with something he hadn't felt in years: humility. After the breakup with the Lakers and Kobe Bryant, critics framed him as the fading giant, past his prime, driven more by pride than performance. But Shaq was never one to whisper. He responded the only way he knew how: by rebuilding. Alongside a young and fearless Dwyane Wade, Shaq reshaped his game. Gone were the days of endless backboard shattering. His minutes were carefully managed. His body was no longer a weapon, it was a responsibility. Ice baths replaced post-game parties. Film sessions stretched longer. He became less of a juggernaut and more of a general. Still, the hunger remained. In 2006, that hunger bore fruit. The Miami Heat stormed through the playoffs. Shaq wasn't the scoring machine he once was, but he anchored the team with experience, grit, and quiet leadership. Wade lit up the scoreboard, but Shaq provided the gravity. Opponents still collapsed around him, still feared his presence. When the Heat clinched the NBA championship that year, it wasn't just a victory, it was a vindication. He had proven he could adapt, evolve, and still win. But time, undefeated as always, began closing in. Injuries became frequent visitors. His explosive first step dulled. The game was changing. Faster, smaller, more perimeter-oriented. Shaq, ever the Titan, was now a man at war with age. He moved from team to team: Phoenix, Cleveland, Boston, each stop a little quieter, a little heavier. Fans still cheered, but the roars softened. No longer the centerpiece, he became a mentor, a symbol of what once was and what could still be learned. Young players respected him, but the spotlight had shifted. Still, Shaq remained Shaq. Jokes, one-liners, and locker room laughs followed him wherever he went. He masked the physical toll with charisma, the frustration with self-deprecating humor. But beneath the smile was a man reckoning with the end. The court had been his world for nearly 2 decades. Letting go was harder than lifting weights or playing through pain. In 2011, he finally did. One tweet. For words: "I'm retiring. Love you." There was no farewell tour. No tearful final game. Just a quiet bow from one of the loudest legends to ever play the game. But this was not the end, only a pause. Shaq had always been more than a basketball player. And off the court, an entirely different legacy was waiting to unfold. Beyond basketball, Shaq's legacy, personality, and impact on culture. Shaquille O'Neal's story was never destined to end with the final buzzer. Retirement, for him, was not a quiet exit but a vibrant reinvention. The man who once commanded arenas with sheer force now captivated millions with his larger-than-life personality and relentless drive to conquer new arenas.